Carl Jung explained, "If a man says these 5 words, walk away in the dimming light of conscious awareness, the persona rises like a delicate mask, crafted from the finest threads of social expectation and personal desire. It is the face we present to the world, shimmering, radiant, and carefully stitched with the intentions to be seen, to be accepted, to be loved. Yet beneath this facade, beneath the careful smile and rehearsed words, lies a whisper, a faint, often overlooked voice of the self. It stirs quietly in the shadowed recesses, beckoning us toward a deeper encounter. Tonight, as you listen, imagine this mask not as a simple veil, but as a labyrinth's entrance, each word a turn, each silence a hidden passage. The 5 words. You may have heard, those elusive utterances that trigger an instinct to step back, to withdraw, are no mere phrases. They are cryptic summons, enigmatic keys that unlock a threshold where the ego dances precariously with deception. They ask us to question, to sense beyond the surface, and to cultivate the courage of discernment. The persona, by its nature, is a compromise. It is a negotiation between the inner self and the outer world, a role, a character in the play of life that shields vulnerability beneath crafted narratives. It is not evil, nor inherently false. It is a necessity born from the collective gaze, the expectation of roles and rituals. But when those 5 words emerge, whispered or declared, they signal a fracture in this delicate architecture. The mask begins to crack, revealing fissures where shadows leak through. This moment, this invitation, is a sacred one. It beckons you to listen not with the ears alone, but with the whole being, to hear not only the words, but the silences that surround them, the pregnant pauses, the unsaid truths, the echoes in the heart's dark chambers. Within this silence, the self speaks, ancient, timeless, and profound. It murmurs of deeper realities, of the archetypal dance between light and shadow, of the ongoing process Jung called individuation. The ego, that fragile construct, often clings to certainty, to control, to the comfort of known stories. But these 5 words dissolve that certainty, like fog swallowing a distant lighthouse. In that dissolution lies possibility, a space where the unconscious stirs, where the shadow may emerge from its hidden cave. To walk away is not merely a physical act. It is a symbolic death, a step into the Nigredo, the blackening stage of alchemical transformation, where the old self dies so that a new self may be born. As you journey through this labyrinth, imagine yourself as both the seeker and the guide, holding a lantern in the dark corridors of your own psyche. The path is winding, often obscured, sometimes terrifying. Yet it is also sacred, a passage through which the soul crosses from fragmentation to wholeness, from illusion to truth. Each step away from those 5 words is also a step toward the luminous core of your being, where persona fades and self is revealed. In this twilight, you stand at the gate, not yet inside the labyrinth, but no longer outside. The invitation is clear and ancient, to walk the path beyond masks, beyond words, into the silent, fertile depths where transformation begins. Listen then, not for the comfort of answers, but for the sacred trembling of questions. For it is in this trembling that the soul's true voice arises, calling you home, and so, with breath steady and heart open, begin the descent into shadows concealed by words, knowing that this journey is a sacred dialogue between the seen and unseen, the spoken and the silent, the persona and the self. Here, at this threshold, the story unfolds, a mythic unfolding where walking away becomes an act of profound becoming. Beneath the surface of spoken words, where sound fades into silence, there stirs a presence often denied, an ancient restless shadow. It is the dark twin of the persona, the hidden half of our being that slips quietly into the cracks of consciousness. These 5 words, like a whispered riddle from the depths, awaken the shadow's murmur, an echo of wounds buried deep beneath. The mask, a reflection of illusions long held as truth. To encounter these words is to enter the realm of Nigredo, the blackening stage of the soul's alchemical transformation. Here, the light we once trusted falters, consumed by darkness that is neither enemy nor curse, but a necessary descent. The shadow, that silent devourer, calls us into the sacred chaos where false selves disintegrate and the soul's fractured edges bleed into the vast unknown. In this shadow dialogue, there is no simple language. It speaks in silence, in absence, in the tremor beneath the voice. It fractures the ego's certainty, revealing the fissures beneath the polished surface. The psyche, in its yearning for wholeness, is compelled to confront this internal abyss, the disowned, the repressed, the parts that would rather remain unseen. Imagine the soul as a vessel, once clear, now clouded by the sediment of denial and fear. The 5 words stir the depths, churning the murky waters of unconscious pain and unresolved conflict. In this alchemical blackness, the soul is purified by fire unseen, a sacred collapse that dismantles illusions and invites profound transformation. But the shadow is not merely darkness. It is also the seed of regeneration, the hidden womb of becoming. It is the fertile ground where light and dark entwine in their eternal dance, where the opposites reconcile through the paradox of enantiodromia. In embracing the shadow's whisper, the soul begins to mend the fractures in its quest for unity, moving beyond the binary of good and evil into a realm where integration is possible. This process is not easy. It demands courage to face the unspeakable, to listen without flinching to the echoes of pain and rejection. Yet it is here, in the depth of shadow dialogue, that the soul discovers its true power, an alchemy that transforms wounds into wisdom, fracture into wholeness, silence into a sacred song of rebirth. As you listen, allow yourself to enter this shadowed realm with gentle eyes and open heart. Let the blackness enfold you, not as a prison but as a crucible, where the false light is consumed and the authentic self begins its slow, luminous emergence. The shadow's whisper is a call to courage, an invitation to descend into the depths. So you may rise renewed. In this sacred dialogue between shadow and self, the soul's journey deepens. The 5 words that once signaled fracture now become the threshold of awakening, the dark mirror reflecting the path toward integration and light. This is the heart of the alchemical mystery, where the darkness devours false light, and through that sacred consumption, true illumination is born. In the silent theater of the psyche, trust is a fragile flame flickering at the boundary where light meets shadow. It is a delicate dance between opposites, between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen, the embrace and the withdrawal. Trust is never static. It is a living, breathing enigma that teeters precariously on the edge of betrayal, like a tightrope walker poised between sky and abyss. In this sacred tension, the ego clings to certainty, that comforting illusion that love and connection are stable, unwavering. Yet beneath this fragile facade, the ground shifts. The 5 words spoken, seemingly simple, yet heavy with unspoken meaning, become the heralds of an ancient law, enantiodromia. This is the soul's paradox, where what has been denied, repressed, or forgotten returns, with a force transformed. What was once hidden in shadows emerges, not as the same, but as a new, often unsettling truth. Trust, in this moment, cracks and fractures, inviting doubt to seep in like mist, swallowing a distant flame. This is not a collapse to be feared, but a sacred rupture, a shattering that precedes rebirth. Imagine trust as a fragile glass chalice filled with light. When those 5 words are uttered, the chalice is struck. Cracks spiderweb across its surface. threatening to spill the precious light into darkness. Yet it is within this breaking that transformation is seeded. The ego, that keeper of illusions, resists this fracture, yearning to preserve what is safe and familiar. But the soul knows that true intimacy demands more than fragile illusions. It demands the courage to walk away, not as abandonment, but as an act of profound integrity. This walking away is not defeat, but the sacred act of boundary setting, a flame that burns away false connection to reveal the ember of authentic relationship. It is the soul's way of saying, I will not sacrifice my wholeness for the illusion of closeness. This paradox that connection sometimes requires distance is a mystery at the heart of individuation. To truly connect, we must first embrace the possibility of separation. The ego's certainty, once a fortress, becomes a prison. Doubt arrives as a liberator, tearing down walls to reveal the vast, wild terrain of the unconscious. Here, the shadow dances with the anima and animus, weaving a tapestry of opposites reconciled. The 5 words, once a source of pain or confusion, become a mirror, reflecting the inner reversal of trust, where love and loss, closeness and distance, light and shadow entwine. As you breathe into this moment, feel the paradox unfold within your own heart. Trust is not a possession to be held tightly, but a river that flows, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes rushing, sometimes still. The courage to walk away is the courage to surrender to this flow, to embrace the mystery of the soul's endless dance between connection and solitude. In this sacred space between yes and no, between holding on and letting go, the self begins to stir. The ego learns to relinquish control, and the self expands beyond the confines of certainty. This is the alchemical heart of trust, the sacred enantiodromia, where denial turns to acceptance, fracture to wholeness, silence to song. And so, with each step away from illusion, the soul journeys deeper into truth. The 5 words are no longer a barrier but a gateway, a threshold where trust is reborn in the sacred balance of opposites, and the eternal dance of intimacy unfolds anew. In the vast silence that follows the rupture, there comes a stillness, a solitude that is neither exile nor punishment, but a sacred chrysalis. This is the hermit's sanctuary, a quiet chamber deep within the soul where the clamor of the persona's performance fades into distant echoes. Here, away from the gaze of the world and its relentless demands, the self awakens to its own presence. Stripped bare of pretense, unmasked and luminous in the gentle firelight of inner clarity. To walk away, in this sacred sense, is not mere withdrawal. It is a retreat into the soul's sanctuary, a deliberate passage into solitude where transformation stirs in the silent depths. The hermit's solitude is a crucible, a space of alchemical silence where the Nigredo gives way to the first sparks of illumination. Like a flame burning steadily through fog, clarity dawns, not as sudden revelation, but as a slow unfolding, a patient unveiling of hidden truths. In this inner sanctum, the self communes with its shadows and light. The ego's frantic need for validation recedes, and the soul begins its sacred dialogue, an ancient conversation woven from the threads of myth, archetype, and timeless wisdom. The hermit archetype emerges here as a guide and guardian, a solitary figure who embraces silence, not as absence, but as presence, an embrace of the soul's depth and complexity. This solitude is paradoxical. It is at once a place of profound isolation and intimate connection, a withdrawal that paradoxically deepens the relationship with the self. The act of walking away becomes an initiation into the mysteries of individuation, where the soul sheds the mask of persona and steps into the sacred unknown. The hermit's path is not marked by loneliness, but by a sacred union with the self, a gathering of fractured fragments into a coherent whole. Imagine the soul as a chrysalis, dark, quiet, and vulnerable, encased in solitude, preparing for the inevitable transformation. The process is neither swift nor easy. It demands courage to face the silence, to sit with the shadows, to endure the discomfort of being alone without the crutches of external affirmation. Yet within this solitude lies the promise of rebirth, the slow emergence of a new self shaped by wisdom, authenticity, and depth. As the fog of confusion lifts, the soul perceives its own contours with increasing clarity. The hermit's fire burns steady and calm, illuminating the path forward, not a path out of solitude, but a path deeper into it, where the self may be known in its fullness. This inner light reveals the gifts hidden within rejection and loss, resilience, insight, and the sacred courage to stand alone. In this sanctuary, the soul learns that walking away is not an end, but a beginning, a sacred retreat that clears space for the emergence of the true self. The hermit's solitude is a holy pause, a moment suspended between what was and what will be, where the soul gathers strength to face the next stages of its journey. Here, in the quiet chambers of solitude, the sacred alchemy of transformation unfolds. The chrysalis cracks, the shadow recedes, and the self begins to stir, ready to step into the light of rebirth, shaped by the sacred fires of inner clarity and profound knowing. The fire of boundaries is not the blaze of destruction, but the sacred flame of purification. It burns away the tangled underbrush of illusion, the false promises of possession, the choking vines of control that suffocate the breath of the true self. This flame is born in the depths of the soul, a molten core of self-respect that radiates outward, drawing a luminous line in the shifting sands of relationship and identity. When those 5 words are spoken, they crackle like sparks igniting. Tinder, a fierce refusal that resonates with the power of an ancient ritual. This is no mere rejection. It is the soul's declaration of sovereignty, the forging of a boundary as real and essential as the skin that holds the body's fragile form. In this moment, the ego learns the sacred art of discernment, the ability to say enough, to hold the space where the self may breathe and thrive. Imagine the ego as a smith at the forge, hammering away at the molten metal of experience. With each strike, it shapes the sword of boundary, sharp, clear, and unwavering. This sword cuts through the shadows of illusion and fear, carving out a sanctuary where authentic connection can emerge. Boundaries are not walls, but gates, portals, that protect the self while inviting those who honor its sacredness to enter. In the alchemy of relationship, the fire of boundaries balances the paradox of closeness and distance. To draw the line is to acknowledge the soul's need for space, a sacred distance that nourishes rather than divides. It is the flame that guards the threshold, ensuring that intimacy does not consume but transforms, that connection does not bind, but liberates. The symbolic fire here is ancient and eternal. It recalls the hearths of old, where tribes gathered to share warmth and stories, but where the flames also kept wild beasts at bay. So too, the soul's boundaries protect the fragile light of individuality amid the wilderness of human entanglement. They are a luminous firewall against the encroachment of the shadow's consuming hunger for control. This fire burns not with anger, but with clarity, a steady, unwavering glow that reveals the truth of what can be held and what must be released. It invites the ego to step beyond reactive patterns, beyond the persona's desperate need for approval, into a deeper dance of power and humility. The sword of discernment is wielded not to wound, but to honor the sacredness of self and other. In this fiery crucible, the soul refines its identity, shedding the dross of false attachments and claims. The boundary becomes a sacred text inscribed, in light and shadow, a declaration that love must flow freely, unburdened by chains of expectation. It is here that the ego learns to balance strength with tenderness, to hold its ground without closing the heart. As you imagine this fire burning within, feel its warmth and clarity seep into your being. This flame is the guardian of your sacred space, the alchemical fire that transforms rejection into liberation, refusal into affirmation. It is the pulse of individuation, where the self emerges from the crucible, forged and radiant, ready to meet the world with open eyes and a steady heart. The fire of boundaries is a sacred gift, a line drawn not to separate but to sanctify, to carve out the holy ground where the soul may dance freely between connection and solitude, love and self-respect. In this flame, the 5 words become not a barrier but a beacon, guiding the way toward authentic, transformative relationship. Within the sacred chambers of the psyche, where light and shadow weave their eternal dance, dwell the anima and animus, the soul's most intimate companions, hidden yet ever present. They are the inner counterparts, the silent guides who whisper in the language of dreams and symbols, beckoning the ego beyond its limited horizon toward wholeness. To encounter them is to embark upon a profound journey, where the familiar boundaries of gender and identity dissolve into the swirling waters of the unconscious. The 5 words spoken, each syllable a tremor in the delicate fabric of relationship, reveal ruptures in this intricate dance. They cast shadows upon the fragile equilibrium of masculine and feminine energies within, fractures where misunderstanding, projection, and pain gather like storm clouds. It is here, in this inner theater, that the soul confronts the enantiodromia, the necessary reversal, where what has been denied or rejected returns transformed, demanding acknowledgement and integration. Imagine the anima and animus as dancers, entwined in a ritual, their movements a sacred choreography of tension and harmony. When their rhythm falters, the dance becomes discordant, rippling outward into the patterns we live and breathe with others. These 5 words break the silence like a sudden discordant note, a fracture in the music that forces the ego to listen, to witness the shadows lurking beneath the surface of intimacy. The anima, the feminine presence within the man, holds the key to emotional depth, intuition, and the mysterious realms of feeling. The animus, the masculine presence within the woman, embodies strength, reason, and the voice of inner authority. Together, they form the soul's bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, a sacred union essential to the process of individuation, the unfolding of the self beyond fragmented identity. Yet this union is never without struggle. The dance is often shadowed by projections, when the anima or animus is cast outward upon others, distorting relationships and masking true connection. These 5 words serve as a rupture, a moment where the projected image shatters, forcing the ego to confront its inner counterparts not as enemies or fantasies, but as integral parts of its own being. In this confrontation, the soul experiences symbolic death, the Nigredo, where old illusions blacken and decay. From this darkness, the alchemical process begins, the purification of the self through the reconciliation of opposites. The anima and animus, once divided and feared, begin their slow integration, weaving together the disparate threads of identity into a tapestry of wholeness. This inner reconciliation mirrors the outer world, where masculine and feminine energies seek balance, not in dominance, but in mutual respect and fluidity. It is a dance that transcends roles and expectations, inviting the ego to surrender rigid definitions and embrace the paradox of its own nature. The shadow's whisper becomes a call to deeper understanding, a summons to the sacred marriage within. As the ego listens and responds, the anima and animus transform from shadows to guides, illuminating the path to authentic relationship with self and other. Their dance becomes a sacred ritual of healing and transformation, where wounds are acknowledged and love is reborn, not as possession, but as freedom. This journey into the depths of inner opposites is fraught with challenge, but rich with promise. It is the heart of individuation, where the soul awakens to its full spectrum and the ego learns to hold the tension of paradox with grace. In the dance of anima and animus, the 5 words become a threshold, both warning and invitation, to step beyond illusion and into the radiant light of integrated being. Pain is the dark matter of the soul, unseen yet fundamental, shaping the very fabric of our inner universe. It is the shadow that clings to the corners of our being, the silent alchemist forging transformation in the crucible of heartbreak. When those 5 words are spoken, they strike like lightning upon this hidden ore, igniting a fire that consumes illusions and melts the hardened shell of the false self. In this sacred flame, the psyche's alchemical process begins, an ancient ritual of symbolic death and rebirth. Imagine the soul as a vessel of lead, heavy and dense with grief and unmet longing. Pain, paradoxically, is both the furnace and the fire, the dark flame that dissolves the leaden weight and calls forth the gold of wisdom beneath. This transmutation is never gentle. It demands surrender, a descent into the Nigredo, the black night of the soul, where all that was certain collapses into shadowed void. It is here that the ego, so accustomed to control and certainty, meets its collapse, and the self, in its radiant mystery, waits to arise. The utterance of these words is like the whispered invocation of an ancient rite, a summons to stand within the sacred fire. Pain opens the alchemical vessel, allowing the psyche to release what no longer serves, the worn masks, the fragmented identities, the stories woven from fear and denial. It is a process of unmaking, where the old must be burned away for the new to take form. This is the chrysalis moment, where the soul's suffering becomes the womb of transformation. Within this fire, the paradox of pain reveals itself. It is both destroyer and creator, the dark mother who cradles the dying self so that the authentic self may be born. The alchemical marriage of opposites unfolds, the dissolution of egoic boundaries alongside the emergence of deeper wholeness. The flame that consumes also illuminates, casting light on the unconscious depths where truth resides, where shadow and light converge. In the midst of this inner conflagration, the soul learns the sacred language of surrender. The pain demands acknowledgement, not resistance. It invites the ego to relinquish control and embrace the mystery of becoming. Here the self begins to rise like a phoenix, not from ashes alone, but from the sacred fire of suffering transmuted into wisdom. This transformation is a journey through darkness toward radiance, a passage through the underworld of the psyche, where the soul confronts its deepest wounds and emerges renewed. It is the essence of individuation, the process by which the fragmented psyche is healed, the shadow integrated, and the authentic self reclaimed. The alchemy of pain is thus a sacred paradox. In our deepest wounds lie the seeds of our greatest awakening. The 5 words, spoken or heard, become the catalyst for this inner metamorphosis, calling us to honor the fire within and trust in the mystery of rebirth. Through this transformative suffering, the soul's journey toward wholeness continues, ever deeper, ever truer, ever more radiant. In the quiet chambers of the psyche, words emerge not as mere vessels of communication, but as shadows cast upon the mirror of the other. Each utterance carries within it the invisible weight of projection, a fragment of the self hurled outward, seeking recognition in another's gaze. Here, beneath the surface of spoken language, lies a dance of concealment and revelation, where blame and judgment ripple like waves upon a still lake. reflecting the hidden contours of our inner world. To speak is to throw a pebble into the reflective pool of relation, but often the ripples distort the image, warping the face we wish to see. The 5 words, enigmatic and precise, strike as a sudden spark upon this mirror, shattering the illusions of separation and calling forth the truth concealed within the fractures. This moment is the threshold of self-examination, an invitation to peer deeply into the interplay between persona and shadow, that eternal dialectic where the ego's carefully crafted mask confronts the unruly depths of the unconscious. Projection is the psyche's shadow work made visible, the unconscious given form in the space between self and other. Like Narcissus entranced by his reflection, we are captivated by the image outside, unaware that it is but a fragment of our own darkness, refracted and distorted. The other becomes a canvas upon which we paint our fears, desires, and wounds, while the true self retreats behind veils of disavowal. This mirror, however, is no mere surface. It is a gateway to individuation, the sacred journey toward wholeness. The fracture lines of blame and judgment trace the edges of what remains unintegrated within us. Each accusation, each slight, each whispered grievance is a symbol, a hieroglyph, of the unconscious calling us to witness ourselves with honesty and compassion. The 5 words thus serve as a talisman, a key unlocking the door to this inner sanctum where the tangled threads of persona and shadow weave the fabric of our relational life. In the sacred space of reflection, the soul embarks upon a descent, an inner journey akin to Orpheus venturing into the underworld to reclaim his lost love. It is here that the self confronts its fragmented images, learning to recognize the shadow not as enemy, but as misunderstood kin. The projection is lifted, revealing the shadow's pain and yearning, its silent cry for acknowledgement and integration. The paradox of projection is that it both obscures and reveals. By seeing the shadow in the other, we are offered the rare opportunity to reclaim those disowned parts of ourselves. This process is the crucible of transformation, where the ego loosens its grip on illusion and the self begins to emerge in its fullness. The mirror no longer deceives, but becomes a sacred altar, reflecting the light and darkness within, demanding a truth deeper than appearances. To walk this path is to engage in a sacred dialogue, not with the other, but with the self beneath. The mask. It requires courage to meet the reflection unflinchingly, to dissolve the boundaries of blame and judgment, and to embrace the totality of one's being. This is the work of individuation, the slow and deliberate unraveling of the persona's threads to reveal the living tapestry of the self. As the soul gazes into this fractured mirror, the words become a prayer and a proclamation, an acknowledgement of the shadow's presence and a commitment to integration. The relational dynamics that once enslaved the spirit now become the sacred dance of awareness, where light and shadow entwine in a harmonious embrace. In this deep seeing, the journey toward wholeness unfolds, not as a destination, but as a continuous unfolding, a sacred conversation between the soul and itself. The mirror is both challenge and blessing, a reflection of the profound mystery that is the human psyche. And through the courage to face this reflection, the self is born anew, radiant and whole, beyond the illusions cast by words and shadows. Acceptance unfolds like dawn, breaking through a storm-tossed night, where the clenched fists of resistance slowly unclench, releasing the harsh grip of control. It is here, at the threshold, that the soul encounters a profound paradox. Surrender is not defeat, but the courageous act of bowing before the flow of life's mystery. To walk away is not a retreat into shadow, but a conscious crossing, a rite of passage from the chains of attachment toward the freedom of being. Imagine the ego as a fortress built atop shifting sands, walls held together by the mortar of expectation and fear. When faced with the inevitability of change, the fortress quakes, its stones dissolving under the floodwaters of acceptance. This dissolution is the alchemical fire that burns away the brittle armor of persona, revealing the deeper sanctuary of the self, timeless, sovereign, and whole. Acceptance is the mythic crossing of the soul, akin to the hero's journey across the river Styx, where the boundaries between life and death, known and unknown, self and other, blur into sacred ambiguity. In this liminal space, the ego relinquishes its claim to certainty, embracing the fluid dance of opposites that Jung named enantiodromia, the inevitable reversal that brings balance to extremes. Here, freedom is born not from resistance, but from yielding. The 5 words whisper like a sacred mantra, a gatekeeper's voice, inviting passage into the inner sanctum where sovereignty dwells. They mark the moment when the soul chooses to release the illusion of possession, of people, outcomes, and identities, thus reclaiming its rightful power. This power is not the ego's brittle pride, but the self's vast ocean, deep and still. Beneath the surface storms, in surrender the soul meets its own reflection in the waters of acceptance. The mirror no longer distorts, but clarifies, revealing the intricate tapestry of life's impermanence and the eternal thread that weaves through all change. It is the thread of soul, shimmering with the light of wisdom born from experience and insight, guiding the ego gently toward its true home. Walking away becomes an act of devotion, a sacred gesture honoring the soul's sovereignty over the fleeting forms of existence. It is the phoenix's flight from the ashes, an emblem of symbolic death and rebirth that Jung revered as the heart of individuation. This rebirth is not a conquest, but a gift, a realignment with the self's deeper wisdom beyond the narrow confines of identity. Acceptance dissolves the boundaries that imprison the heart, transforming resistance into a bridge that spans the chasm between suffering and peace. The soul's sovereignty emerges in this sacred alchemy, where every loss is a seed of renewal, and every ending the dawn of possibility. It is here that the ego learns the art of graceful release, finding strength in letting go. This threshold is not a final destination, but a sacred moment of passage, a pause where the soul gathers its breath before stepping into the unfolding mystery. The paradox of acceptance is that it frees the soul precisely because it surrenders control, inviting trust in the unknown and faith in the self's enduring light. As the soul crosses this threshold, the 5 words echo as a hymn of liberation, a call to embrace impermanence with open arms and an open heart. The journey from bondage to freedom is marked not by external conquest, but by an inner awakening, a recognition that true sovereignty arises when resistance melts into surrender and the self dances with the eternal flow of life. From the depths of night, where shadows curl like smoke around the flickering flame of consciousness, the self begins its return, no longer fragmented, but gathered whole, like a constellation reunited after the vast, lonely scatter of stars. The journey through darkness, the descent into the labyrinth of shadow, has wrought a transformation profound and silent, a rebirth not of the ego's shallow triumph, but of the soul's luminous wholeness. The 5 words, once sharp as shards of ice piercing the fragile veil of illusion, now echo as a sacred chant, a hymn of awakening that reverberates through the corridors of the unconscious. They no longer divide or wound. Instead, they weave together the torn threads of being into a seamless tapestry where light and shadow dance in eternal embrace. In this moment of sacred reintegration, the self emerges as the alchemist's gold, refined by fire, transmuted through suffering, and reborn in radiant clarity. It is the union of opposites Jung so tenderly named, the interplay of anima and animus, the dance of ego and self, shadow and light. This union is not a conquest, but a sacred marriage, a sacred balance that births the phoenix of individuation. The labyrinth of the psyche, once a place of fear and disarray, now reveals itself as a sacred sanctuary where the soul finds its home. The persona, once a mask worn to navigate the world, dissolves into a mirror reflecting the authentic self beneath, a self not bound by the ephemeral but rooted in the eternal depths of being. Here, the ego bows in humble recognition, no longer the master but the devoted servant of the greater whole. The return of the self is a dawn breaking through the fog of confusion and despair, a flame kindled by the tender hands of acceptance and the fierce embrace of shadow. It is the moment when the soul remembers its own divinity, its own unbroken thread woven through the tapestry of existence. This remembrance is not loud or grandiose, but a quiet, unwavering light shining steadily within the heart's sanctuary. Symbolic death and rebirth have carried the soul through the abyss, where illusions fell away like autumn leaves and new roots took hold in the fertile soil of insight. The self now stands on the threshold of a new beginning, not a beginning born from egoic desire, but from the deep wellspring of inner knowing and sacred surrender. Enantiodromia, the turning of opposites into one, reveals itself in this sacred dance. The tensions that once threatened to unravel the soul are transfigured into a harmonious rhythm, a pulse that beats in time with the eternal mystery of life and death, loss and gain, sorrow and joy. The self returns not as a fragmented wanderer, but as the radiant center of the soul's unfolding story. This return is a homecoming beyond time and space, a reunion with the eternal archetype that dwells within us all. It is the wise old sage and the innocent child entwined, the warrior and the healer united, the darkness and the light fused in a single shining flame. It is the sacred paradox of being both whole and ever becoming. In the quiet aftermath of this inner storm, the soul speaks softly, inviting us to listen. Here is the truth beyond words, the silence beneath the noise, the stillness within the dance. The self, returned and reconciled, beckons us to step into the mystery with open hearts, to walk the path of individuation with courage and grace. This is the sacred return, the triumphant yet humble homecoming of the soul to itself, a testament to the power of transformation, the healing of fractures, and the eternal dance of wholeness. In the beginning, there is the silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something more profound, a sacred void that holds the breath of the soul itself. It is here, in this hallowed stillness, that the deepest communication unfolds, not through words, but through the unspoken language of being. The silence is neither empty nor barren. It is a fertile chrysalis, cradling the potential for rebirth, a liminal space where the psyche's alchemical fires burn quietly beneath the surface. The ego, accustomed to the chatter of thoughts and the cacophony of external noise, trembles as it approaches this sacred threshold. Here the persona's voice grows faint, its illusions unravel like mist dissolving in the morning sun. The silence calls to the shadow, inviting it to step out of its hidden corners and face the still mirror of inner truth. It is in this encounter that transformation begins, not with the clang of sword on shield, but with the gentle unfolding of a flower in the dark. This silence is the breath between heartbeats, the pause between inhalation and exhalation, where the soul listens with open wings. It is the sacred interstice where opposites meet, the conscious and unconscious, the known and unknown, the self and the other. Jung called this the numinous space, a holy ground where spirit whispers secrets that defy language. To enter this silence is to descend into the wellspring of the collective unconscious, to drink from the waters of myth and archetype flowing beneath the river of everyday life. In this silence, the psyche undergoes its symbolic death, the death of old narratives, worn identities and fragmented selves. It is a still death, a yielding rather than a struggle, a surrender to the mystery that births the new. The silence is not a void of meaning, but a deep womb of meaning yet to be born. Here, the soul sheds its chrysalis, ready to emerge in radiant transformation. The paradox of silence is that it is both departure and arrival. Walking away from the noise of the ego's demands is a relinquishment, a conscious stepping back from the battlefield of external validation and inner turmoil. Yet this departure is also a homecoming, a return to the sacred center where true communication begins. In the silence, the soul hears its own voice echoing, a voice beyond words, resonating with the timeless wisdom of the self. This sacred silence is a dance of presence and absence, a rhythm that pulses beneath the surface of awareness. It invites us to listen deeply, not to respond or control, but to simply be. To be still in the face of chaos, to hold the tension of opposites without needing to resolve them. Here, transformation ripens slowly, like fruit swelling in the secret orchard of the psyche, unseen but inevitable. The silence holds the shadows with gentle hands, inviting integration rather than rejection. It is the space where the wounded parts of the self find refuge, where the fragmented pieces gather in quiet reconciliation. In this sacred pause, the self begins to weave the broken threads of experience into a tapestry of wholeness. It is the alchemical marriage of light and shadow, a union celebrated not in noise, but in the hush of understanding. Words, once sharp and wielded like swords, soften into whispers. The 5 words that carried the soul through fire and darkness now dissolve into the silence, their meaning expanded beyond definition. They become symbols, vessels for the mysteries too vast for language, echoes of the unconscious speaking directly to the heart. The silence is the true language of the soul, intimate, profound, and eternal. In this silence, the ego learns the art of listening, to the pulse of the self, to the rhythms of nature, to the call of the collective soul. It learns that power is not in control, but in surrender, that wisdom is born not from knowing, but from allowing. The sacred silence becomes a sanctuary, a temple within where the soul can rest and gather strength for the next stage of its journey. Sacred silence is also a mirror, reflecting back the soul's deepest truths. It reveals the enantiodromia of existence, the turning of opposites that brings balance and renewal. In the quiet depths, the soul sees its own reflection not as fragmented or flawed, but as a luminous whole, an ever-unfolding mystery embracing both shadow and light. As the silence deepens, time itself seems to dissolve. Past and future merge into the eternal now, a moment of pure presence where transformation is already complete. The soul breathes in this eternal moment, and in doing so steps beyond the confines of ego and persona into the vast, boundless expanse of selfhood. This sacred silence, then, is not an end but a beginning, the fertile ground from which new meaning arises, a holy wellspring from which the soul drinks deeply. It is the heartbeat beneath all sound, the stillness at the core of the turning world. To walk into this silence is to embark on the most profound journey, the journey home to the self, where spirit speaks in the language of stillness, and transformation ripens unseen, eternal and whole. The road stretches endlessly, a serpentine path woven through the shadows and light of the soul's vast landscape. Each step taken is both a departure and a return, a passage through the veil where life and death dance their eternal waltz. This journey is not a line drawn from beginning to end, but a spiral circling ever inward and outward, a pilgrimage of the spirit echoing through the chambers of time and the depths of the psyche. The soul moves like a wanderer beneath a star-scattered sky, guided not by certainty, but by the whispered language of the unconscious. These 5 words, each a beacon of flame flickering through the dark, serve as signposts on this sacred road, markers of passage that remind the pilgrim of the sacred paradox at the heart of all transformation. To lose oneself is to find oneself. To die is to be born anew. In this pilgrimage, the ego unfolds as both companion and challenger, the persona shifting like a mask caught between the worlds of light and shadow. Here, the dance of opposites unfolds, masculine and feminine, order and chaos, known and unknown, an endless enantiodromia pulling the traveler toward the center where the self waits, a luminous presence beyond all division. The mythic landscape reveals itself in the symbols that rise like ancient mountains from the unconscious depths, each peak a threshold of transformation, each valley a place of surrender. The pilgrim encounters the shadow, the rejected parts lurking in forgotten caves, and learns to carry its weight with grace. In the alchemy of this encounter, the shadow's leaden burden is transmuted into the gold of wholeness, its darkness folded into the radiant fabric of the self. Separation and reunion, loss and recovery, night and dawn, these cycles form the rhythm of the eternal pilgrimage. Each symbolic death is a shedding of the old skin, each rebirth a blossoming of new life. The traveler comes to know that the journey is not toward a final destination, but toward a deeper, ever-renewing relationship with the mystery itself. The Psyche's pilgrimage is written in the language of myth, an odyssey that echoes the stories of heroes and gods, saints and seekers. Like Orpheus descending into the underworld, like the phoenix rising from ashes, the soul is called to cross boundaries, confront the unknowable, and emerge transformed. This is the sacred narrative inscribed in the heart of individuation, the unfolding of the unique myth that is each life. The 5 words, in their profound simplicity, invite the soul to embrace the paradoxes of existence. They are not commandments, but sacred utterances, reminders that freedom comes through surrender, that strength is born in vulnerability, that truth is found in the dialogue between light and shadow. They call the pilgrim to walk with courage through the fog of uncertainty, to trust the silent guidance of the self beyond the ego's grasp. As the journey continues, the soul learns to honor the sacredness of the path itself, the worn stones beneath its feet, the whispering winds that carry ancient songs, the quiet stars that illuminate the night. Each moment becomes a portal, each breath a prayer, each step a sacred rite of passage. The pilgrimage is a living meditation on impermanence and presence, a sacred dance between holding on and letting go. The eternal pilgrimage is, above all, a testament to the resilience and mystery of the human spirit. It reveals that beneath the masks, beyond the shadows, there lies a core of unshakable light, a self that is both infinite and intimate, boundless and tender. This self is the true destination, the sacred home to which every traveler returns again and again, in cycles, unending. In the silence of the heart's deepest chamber, the soul hears the call to continue, to journey ever onward into the unknown. This call is neither fearsome nor distant. It is a song woven from the threads of hope, wisdom, and love. It reminds the pilgrim that every ending is a beginning, every descent a rise, every farewell a greeting. The pilgrimage itself is the sacred mystery, the eternal unfolding of the soul's mythic odyssey, and so, with steady steps and an open heart, the traveler moves forward, into darkness, into light, into the sacred silence between. This is the dance of the self, the sacred spiral of becoming, the eternal pilgrimage where life and spirit meet, entwined forever in the great unfolding of all that is, was, and will be. Video description. In the silent depths beneath our carefully crafted masks, the soul whispers truths that words often fail to capture. This video explores the profound meaning behind 5 simple words that signal more than just a moment of discomfort. They beckon us into the labyrinth of the psyche, where persona and shadow collide. Guided by Carl Jung's timeless insights, we journey through the sacred threshold of individuation, where walking away becomes an act of spiritual courage and an invitation to transformation. These words fracture the fragile certainty of the ego, inviting us to face the shadow's hidden wounds and enter the alchemical Nigredo, a necessary descent into darkness that cleanses and prepares the soul for rebirth. Here, trust dissolves and re-emerges, not as possession, but as the fluid dance between light and shadow, connection and solitude. To walk away is not abandonment, but a sacred retreat into the hermit's solitude, where the self unfolds beyond all masks. Join this mythic pilgrimage inward as we contemplate the eternal dance of opposites and the soul's journey toward wholeness. This is an invocation to listen with more than ears, to hear the silent song of the self beyond words and appearances. If this resonates with your own inner journey, share your reflections and experiences below. How have you met your shadow in the face of rupture? Let us walk this path together. Hashtags: Carl Jung, shadow work, individuation, Jungian psychology, persona and shadow, alchemical Nigredo, enantiodromia, soul journey, hermit archetype, psyche transformation,